The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale is a 1985 dystopian novel by Canadian author Margaret Atwood, set in a near-future New England, in a totalitarian theocracy that has overthrown the United States government. The novel explores themes of women in subjugation, and the various means by which they gain individualism and independence. The novel's title echoes the component parts of Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, which comprises a series of connected stories. The Handmaid's Tale won the 1985 Governor-General's Award and the first Arthur C. Clarke Award in 1987. It was also nominated for the 1986 Nebula Award, the 1986 Booker Prize, and the 1987 Prometheus Award. The book has been adapted into a film, an opera, a TV series, and other media. Plot summary. The Handmaid's Tale is set in the Republic of Gilead, a theocratic military dictatorship formed within the borders of what was formerly the United States of America, beginning with a staged attack that killed the president and most of Congress. A Christian fundamentalist movement calling itself Sons of Jacob launches a revolution and suspends the United States Constitution under the pretext of restoring order. They are quickly able to take away women's rights, largely attributed to financial records being stored electronically and labeled by sex. The new regime, the Republic of Gilead, moves quickly to consolidate its power and reorganize society along a new militarized, hierarchical regime. Although Old Testament-inspired social and religious fanaticism among its newly created social classes. In this society, human rights are severely limited and women's rights are even more curtailed. For example, women are forbidden to read. The story is told in the first person by a woman called Offred. The character is one of a class of women kept for reproductive purposes and known as handmaids by the ruling class in an era of declining births due to sterility from pollution and sexually transmitted diseases. Offred describes her life during her third assignment as a handmaid, in this case to Fred. Interspersed in flashbacks are portions of her life from before and during the beginning of the revolution, when she finds she has lost all autonomy to her husband, through her failed attempt to escape with her husband and daughter to Canada, to her indoctrination into life as a handmaid. Offred describes the structure of Gilead's society, including the several different classes of women, and their circumscribed lives in the new theocracy. The commander is a high-ranking official in Gilead, although he is supposed to have contact with Offred only during the ceremony, a ritual of sexual intercourse intended to result in conception and at which his wife is present. He begins an illegal and ambiguous relationship with her. He offers her hidden or contraband products, such as old-fashioned magazines, cosmetics and clothes, takes her to a secret brothel run by the government, and furtively meets with her in his study, where he allows her to read, an activity otherwise prohibited for women. The commander's wife, Serena Joy, also has secret interactions with Offred, arranging for her secretly to have sex with Nick, the commander's driver, in an effort to get Offred pregnant. In exchange for Offred's cooperation, Serena Joy gives her news of her daughter, whom Offred has not seen since she and her family were captured trying to escape Gilead. After Offred's initial meeting with Nick, they begin to rendezvous more frequently. Offred discovers she enjoys sex with Nick, despite her indoctrination and her memories of her husband. She shares potentially dangerous information about her past with him. Through another handmaid, Offred learns of the May Day resistance, an underground network working to overthrow Gilead. Shortly after Offred's disappearance, the commander's wife finds evidence of the relationship between Offred and the commander. Offred contemplates suicide. As the novel concludes, she is being taken away by the secret police. the Eyes of God, known informally as the Eyes, under orders from Nick. Before she is put in the large black van, Nick tells her that the men are part of the Mayday resistance and that Offred must trust him. Offred does not know if Nick is a member of the Mayday resistance or a government agent posing as one, and she does not know if going with the men will result in her escape or her capture. She enters the van with her future uncertain. The novel concludes with a metafictional epilogue that explains that the events of the novel occurred shortly after the beginning of what is called the Gilead period. The epilogue is a partial transcript of the proceedings of the 12th Symposium on Gileadine Studies, written in 2195. According to the symposium's keynote speaker, Professor Pious Otto, he and colleague Professor Notley Wade discovered Offred's story recorded on 2 cassette tapes. They transcribed the tapes, calling them collectively The Handmaid's Tale. Through the tone and actions of the professionals in this final section of the book, the world of academia is highlighted and critiqued, and Pious Otto discusses his team's search for the characters named in the tale, and the impossibility of proving the tape's authenticity. Nevertheless, the epilogue implies that, following the collapse of the theocratic Republic of Gilead, a more equal society, though not the United States that previously existed, re-emerged with the restoration of full rights for women and freedom of religion. Offred. Offred is the protagonist and narrator. She was labeled a wanton woman when Gilead was established because she had married a man who was divorced. All divorces were nullified by the new government, meaning her husband was now considered still married to his first wife, making Offred an adulteress. In trying to escape Gilead, she was separated from her husband and daughter. She is part of the first generation of Gilead's women, those who remember pre-Gilead times. Proven fertile, she is considered an important commodity, and had been placed as a handmaid in the home of the commander Fred and his wife Serena Joy, to bear a child for them. Offred is a slave name that describes her function. She is of Fred. She belongs to Fred, her commander, and is considered a concubine. In the novel, Offred says that she is not a concubine, but a tool, a two-legged womb. Offred is also a pun on the word offered, as in, offered as a sacrifice. It is implied that her birth name is June. The women in training to be handmaids whisper names across their beds at night. The names are Alma, Janine, Dolores, Moira, June, and all are later accounted for except June. In addition, one of the aunts tells the handmaids in training to stop mooning and juning. Minor suggests that June is a pseudonym, as Mayday is the name of the Gilead resistance. June could be an invention by the protagonist. The Nunavut conference covered in the epilogue takes place in June. Atwood wrote that it was not her original intention to imply that Offred's real name is June, but it fits, so readers are welcome to it if they wish. The Commander. The commander says that he is a sort of scientist, and was previously involved in something similar to market research, pre-Gilead. Later, it is hypothesized, but not confirmed, that he might have been one of the architects of the Republic and its laws. Presumably, his first name is Fred, though that, too, may be a pseudonym. He engages in forbidden intellectual pursuits with Offred, such as playing Scrabble, and introduces her to a secret club that serves as a brothel for high-ranking officers. Offred learns that the commander carried on a similar relationship with his previous handmaid, and that she killed herself when his wife found out. In the epilogue, the academics speculate that one of two figures, both instrumental in the establishment of Gilead, may have been Fred, based on his first name. It is strongly suggested that the commander was a man named Frederick R. Waterford, who was killed in a purge shortly after Offred was taken away, charged with harboring an enemy agent. Serena Joy. Serena Joy is a former televangelist and the commander's wife in the fundamentalist theocracy. The state took away her power and public recognition, and tries to hide her past as a television figure. Offred identifies her master's wife by recalling seeing her on TV when she was a little girl early on Saturday mornings while waiting for the cartoons to air. Believed to be sterile, she is forced to accept that he has use of a handmaid. She resents having to take part in the monthly fertility ritual. She strikes a deal with Offred to arrange for her to have sex with Nick in order to become pregnant. According to Professor Pious Otto in the epilogue, Serena Joy, or Ham, are pseudonyms. The character's real name is implied to be Thelma. Offglin. Offglin is a neighbor of Offred's and a fellow handmaid. She is partnered with Offred to do the daily shopping. Handmaids are never alone, and are expected to police each other's behavior. Offglin is a member of the Mayday resistance. In contrast to Offred, she is daring. She knocks out a Mayday spy who is to be tortured and killed in order to save him the pain of a violent death. Offred is told that when Offglin vanishes, it is because she has committed suicide before the government can take her into custody due to her membership in the resistance, possibly to avoid giving away any information. A new handmaid, also called Offglin, takes Offglin's place, and is assigned as Offred's shopping partner. She threatens Offred against any thought of resistance. She breaks protocol by telling her what happened to the first Offglin. Nick. Nick is the commander's chauffeur, who lives above the garage. By Serena Joy's arrangement, he and Offred start a sexual relationship to increase her chance of getting pregnant. If she were unable to bear the commander a child, she would be declared sterile and shipped to the ecological wastelands of the colonies. Offred begins to develop feelings for him. Nick is an ambiguous character, and Offred does not know if he is a party loyalist or part of the resistance, though he identifies himself as the latter. The epilogue suggests that he really was part of the resistance, and aided Offred in escaping the commander's house. Moira. Moira has been a close friend of Offred's since college. A lesbian, she has resisted the homophobia of Gilead society. Moira is taken to be a handmaid soon after Offred. She escapes by stealing an aunt's passing clothes. Offred later encounters her working as a prostitute in a party-run brothel. She had been caught, and chose the brothel over being sent to the colonies. Luke. Luke was Offred's husband prior to the formation of Gilead. He had divorced his first wife to marry her. Under Gilead, all divorces were retroactively nullified, resulting in Offred being considered an adulteress, and their daughter a bastard. Offred was forced to become a handmaid, and her daughter was given to a loyalist family. Since their attempt to escape to Canada, Offred has heard nothing of Luke. Professor Pious Otto. Pious Otto is the co-discoverer with Professor Notley Wade of Offred's tapes. He talks in his presentation about the problems of authentication in reference to The Handmaid's Tale. Setting. The novel is set in an indeterminate future, speculated to be around the year 2005. With a fundamentalist theocracy ruling the territory of what had been the United States, but is now the Republic of Gilead. Individuals are segregated by categories, and dressed according to their social functions. The complex sumptuary laws play a key role in imposing social control within the new society. and serve to distinguish people by sex, occupation, and caste. The action takes place in the Harvard Square neighborhood of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Atwood studied at Radcliffe College, located in this area. Politics. In Gilead, the bodies of women are politicized and controlled. The North American population is falling as more men and women become infertile. Gilead's treatment of women is based upon a narrow, fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible, meaning that women are the property of and subordinate to their husband, father, or head of household. They are not allowed to do anything that would grant them any power independent of this system. They are not allowed to vote, hold a job, read, possess money, or own anything, among many other restrictions. A particular quote from The Handmaid's Tale sums this up. "The Republic of Gilead," said Aunt Lydia, "knows no bounds. Gilead is within you." This describes that there is no way around the societal bounds of women in this new state of government. Handmaids, being not allowed to wed, are given 2-year assignments with a commander, and lose their own name. They are called of their commander's first name, such as the novel's heroine, known only as Offred. When a handmaid is reassigned, her name changes with her. Their original identities before the revolution are suppressed, although while being re-educated as handmaids, they surreptitiously share their names with each other. In this book, the government appears to be strong, though no one in Gilead seems to be a true believer in its revolution. The commanders, portrayed via Commander Fred, do not agree with their own doctrines. The commander takes Offred at one point to a brothel in order to have sex with her in an informal setting apart from the ceremony. The wives, portrayed via Serena Joy, former television evangelist, disobey the rules set forth by their commander husbands. Serena smokes black market cigarettes and expresses the forbidden idea that men may be infertile, and schemes to get Offred impregnated by her chauffeur. Caste and Class. African Americans, the main non-white ethnic group in this society, are called the Children of Ham. A state TV broadcast mentions they have been relocated en masse to national homelands in the Midwest, which are suggestive of the apartheid-era homeland set up by South Africa. Roman Catholics are only briefly mentioned. Nuns who refuse conversion are considered unwomen and banished to the colonies due to their reluctance to marry and refusal, inability to bear children. Priests unwilling to convert are executed and hung from the wall. Jews are called sons of Jacob, also the name of the fundamentalist group that rules the Republic of Gilead. Offred observes that Jews refusing to convert are allowed to emigrate to Israel, and most choose to leave. However, in the epilogue, Professor Pious Otto reveals that many of the emigrating Jews ended up being dumped into the sea while on the ships ostensibly tasked with transporting them to Israel, due to privatization of the repatriation program and capitalists' effort to maximize profits. Offred mentions that many Jews who chose to stay were caught secretly practicing Judaism and executed. Gender and occupation. The sexes are strictly divided. Gilead's society values reproduction by white women most highly. Women are categorized hierarchically according to class status and reproductive capacity, as well as metonymically color-coded according to their function and their labor. The commander expresses the prevailing opinion that women are considered intellectually and emotionally inferior to men. Women are segregated by clothing, as are men. With rare exception, men wear military or paramilitary uniforms, which takes away their individualism as it does the women, but also gives them a sense of bravado and empowerment. All classes of men and women are defined by the colors they wear, drawing on color symbolism and psychology. All lower-status individuals are regulated by this dress code. All non-persons are banished to the colonies. Sterile, unmarried women are considered to be non-persons. Both men and women sent there wear grey dresses. Women. 6 main categories of legitimate women make up mainstream society. 2 chief categories of illegitimate women live outside of mainstream society. Legitimate women, wives, they are at the top social level permitted to women. They are married to the higher-ranking functionaries. Wives always wear blue dresses, suggesting traditional depictions of the Virgin Mary in historic Christian art. When a commander dies, his wife becomes a widow and must dress in black. Daughters, the natural or adopted children of the ruling class, they wear white until marriage, which is now prearranged. The narrator's daughter has been adopted by an infertile wife. And commander, handmaids, fertile women whose social function is to bear children for their wives. They dress in a red habit that completely conceals their shape, plus red shoes and red gloves. They wear white wings around their heads to prevent their seeing or being seen except when standing directly in front of a person. Handmaids are produced by re-educating fertile women who have broken the gender and social laws. Needing fertile handmaids, Gilead gradually increased the number of gender crimes. The Republic of Gilead justifies use of the handmaids for procreation based on biblical stories. Jacob took his 2 wives' handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah, to bed to bear him children, when the wives could not. And Abraham took his wife's handmaid, Hagar. Handmaids are generally assigned to commanders, allowed to live in their houses, but remanded back to aunts' facilities in the event a commander is deployed in order to be guarded. Handmaids who successfully bear children to term assist in raising them for a short time, and are then sent away to a new assignment, never to see the child they bore again. Their success as a handmaid, however, means they will never be declared an unwoman and sent to the colonies, even if they never have another baby. Aunts, they train and monitor the handmaids. They promote the role of handmaid as an honorable and legitimate one, and a method by which women who have committed crimes can redeem themselves. They directly control and police women. Serving as an aunt is the only role for such unmarried, infertile, and often older women to have any autonomy. It allows them to avoid going to the colonies. Aunts dress in brown. They are the only class of women permitted to read from a disc. The voice was a man's. In the Anchor Books edition, they played it from a tape, so not even an aunt would be guilty of the sin of reading. The voice was a man's. Marthas, they are older infertile women who have domestic skills and are compliant, making them suitable as servants. They dress in green smocks. The title of Martha is based on a story in Luke chapter 10 verses 38 to 42, where Jesus visits Mary, sister of Lazarus, and Martha. Mary listens to Jesus while Martha works at all the preparations that had to be made. O'Connor wives, women who have married relatively low-ranking men, not part of the elite. They are expected to perform all the female functions, domestic duties, companionship, and childbearing. Their dress is multicolored red, blue, and green to reflect these multiple roles. The division of labor among the women generates some resentment. Martha's wives and O'Connor wives perceive handmaids as promiscuous and are taught to scorn them. Offred mourns that the women of the various groups have lost their ability to empathize with each other. They are divided in their oppression. Illegitimate women, unwomen, sterile women, the unmarried, some widows, feminists, lesbians, nuns, and politically dissident women, all women who are incapable of social integration within the Republic's strict gender divisions. Gilead exiles unwomen to the colonies, areas both of agricultural production and of deadly pollution. joining them are those handmaids who fail to bear a child after 3 two-year assignments. Jezebels, women forced to become prostitutes and entertainers. They are available only to the commanders and to their guests. Offred portrays Jezebels as attractive and educated. They may be unsuitable as handmaids due to temperament. They have been sterilized, a surgery that is forbidden to other women. They operate in unofficial, but state-sanctioned brothels, unknown to most women. Jezebels, whose title also comes from the Bible, dress in the remnants of sexualized costumes from the time before, such as cheerleaders' costumes, school uniforms, and Playboy bunny costumes. Jezebels can wear makeup, drink alcohol, and socialize with men, but are tightly controlled by the aunts. When they pass their sexual prime and/or their looks fade, they are discarded, without any precision as to whether they are killed or sent to the colonies. In the novel, Men are classified into 4 main categories: commanders of the faithful, the ruling class. Because of their status, they are entitled to establish a patriarchal household with a wife, the handmaid if necessary, martyrs and guardians. They have a duty to procreate, but many may be infertile, as a possible result of exposure to a biological agent in pre-Gilead times. They wear black to signify superiority. They are allowed cars, eyes, the secret police attempting to discover those violating the rules of Gilead, angels, soldiers who fight in the wars in order to expand and protect the country's borders. Angels may be permitted to marry. Guardians, soldiers, used for routine policing and other menial functions. They are unsuitable for other work in the Republic, being stupid or old or disabled, or very young, apart from the ones that are eyes incognito. Young guardians may be promoted to angels when they come of age. They wear green uniforms. Men who engage in homosexuality or related acts are declared gender traitors. They are either hanged or sent to the colonies to die a slow death. Babies. In this society, birth defects have become increasingly common. There are 2 main categories of human children: unbabies, also known as shredders, babies born physically deformed, or with some other birth defect. They do not last, but Offred does not know, or want to know, what happens to them. Pregnant handmaids fear giving birth to a damaged child, or unbaby. Gilead forbids abortion, and has done away with other testing to determine prenatal health of a fetus. Creepers, babies that are born alive with no defects. The ceremony. The ceremony is a non-marital sexual act sanctioned for reproduction. The ritual requires the handmaid to lie on her back between the legs of the wife during the sex act as if they were one person. The wife has to invite the handmaid to share her power this way. Many wives consider this both humiliating and offensive. Offred describes the ceremony. Language. In the novel's fictional fundamentalist society, sterile is an outlawed word. In this society, there is no such thing as a sterile man anymore. In this culture, women are either fruitful or barren, the latter of which is declared to be an unwoman, and is sent to the colonies with the rest of the unwomen to do life-threatening work until their death, which is, on average, 3 years. Atwood emphasizes how changes in context affect behaviors and attitudes by repeating the phrase, "context is all," throughout the novel, establishing this precept as a motif. Playing the game of Scrabble with her commander illustrates the key significance of changes in context. Once, the game of old men and women, the game became forbidden for women to play, and therefore, desirable. Through living in a morally rigid society, Offred has come to perceive the world differently from earlier. Offred expresses amazement at how it has taken so little time to change our minds about things. Wearing revealing clothes and makeup had been part of her former life, but when she sees Japanese tourists dressed that way, she now feels the women are inappropriately dressed. Offred can read, but not translate the phrase, "No light tea bastards carborundorum," carved into the closet wall of her small bedroom. This mock Latin aphorism signifies, "Don't let the bastards grind you down." The significance of this phrase is intensified by the challenges the book has faced, creating a mise en abîme as both the protagonist and the reader decipher subversive texts. Genre classification. In interviews and essays, Atwood has discussed generic classification of The Handmaid's Tale as science fiction or speculative fiction. Observing, Hugo-winning science fiction critic David Langford observed in a column, "The Handmaid's Tale won the very first Arthur C. Clarke Award in 1987. SHE's been trying to live this down ever since." He says, in distinguishing between these genre labels science fiction and speculative fiction, Atwood acknowledges that others may use the terms interchangeably, but she notes her interest in this type of work to explore themes in ways that realistic fiction cannot do. Historical context. Fitting with her claims that A Handmaid's Tale is a work of speculative fiction, not science fiction, Atwood's novel offers a satirical view of various social, political, and religious trends of 1980s United States. Further, Atwood questions what would happen if these trends, and especially casually held attitudes about women, were taken to the logical end. Atwood continues to argue that all of the scenarios offered in The Handmaid's Tale have actually occurred in real life. In an interview she gave regarding Oryx and Crake, Atwood maintains that, as with The Handmaid's Tale, "I didn't put in anything that we haven't already done, we're not already doing, we're seriously trying to do, coupled with trends that are already in progress. So all of those things are real, and therefore the amount of pure invention is close to nil." Atwood was also known to carry around newspaper clippings to her various interviews to support her fiction's basis in reality. Atwood has explained that The Handmaid's Tale is a response to those who claim the oppressive, totalitarian, and religious governments that have taken hold in other countries throughout the years can't happen here. But in this work, she has tried to show how such a takeover might play out. Atwood's inspiration for The Republic of Gilead came from her time studying early American Puritans while at Harvard, which she attended on a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. Atwood argues that the modern view of the Puritans, that they came to America to flee religious persecution in England and set up a religiously tolerant society, is misleading, and that instead, these Puritan leaders wanted to establish a monolithic theocracy, where religious dissent would not be accepted. Atwood also had a personal connection to the Puritans, and she dedicates the novel to her own ancestor Mary Webster, who was accused of witchcraft in Puritan New England, but survived her hanging. Due to the religious nature of Gileadan society, Atwood clearly drew from the Bible for both the title of this novel as well as some of the specific traits and practices of this theocracy. In fact, Atwood has often argued that in order for a coup such as the one depicted in The Handmaid's Tale to occur, religion would have to be evoked. If you wanted to seize power in the US, abolish liberal democracy and set up a dictatorship, how would you go about it? What would be your cover story? It would not resemble any form of communism or socialism. Those would be too unpopular. Nations never build apparently radical forms of government on foundations that aren't there already. Thus China replaced a state bureaucracy with a similar state bureaucracy under a different name. The USSR replaced the dreaded imperial secret police with an even more dreaded secret police, and so forth. The deep foundation of the US, so went my thinking, was not the comparatively recent 18th century Enlightenment structures of the Republic, with their talk of equality and their separation of church and state, but the heavy-handed theocracy of 17th century Puritan New England, with its marked bias against women, which would need only the opportunity of a period of social chaos to reassert itself. Like any theocracy, this one would select a few passages from the Bible to justify its actions, and it would lean heavily towards the Old Testament, not towards the New. In her work Just a Backlash, Margaret Atwood, Feminism, and The Handmaid's Tale, Shirley Newman writes, women made up an increasing percentage of those in the lowest paid occupations, and they made no gains or lost ground in the better paid trades and professions. The number of elected and politically appointed women declined. 1/3 of all federal budget cuts under Reagan's presidency came from programs that served mainly women, even though these programs represented only 10% of the federal budget. The average amount a divorced man paid in child support fell 25%. Murders related to sexual assault and domestic violence increased by 160%, while the overall murder rate declined. Meanwhile, the federal government defeated bills to fund shelters for battered women, stalled already approved funding, and in 1981 closed down the Office of Domestic Violence it had opened only 2 years earlier. Pro-natalists bombed and set fire to abortion clinics and harassed their staff and patients. Medicaid ceased to fund legal abortions, effectively eliminating freedom of choice for most teenage girls and poor women. Several states passed laws restricting not only legal abortion, but even the provision of information about abortion. The debate about freedom of choice for women flipped over into court rulings about the rights and freedom of the fetus. The Equal Rights Amendment died. The leaders of the new right and moral majority of 1980s America preached against the feminist movement, arguing that feminists encourage women to leave their husbands, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism and become lesbians. As explained by former Minister Pat Robertson in a letter to his congregation, women such as Phyllis Schlafly and Tammy Faye Messner built their careers preaching against feminism, telling women to return home, to let their husbands provide, and to use their femininity and feminine wiles as the core of their success and fulfillment as women. Atwood also draws connections between the ways in which Gilead's leaders maintain their power and other examples of actual totalitarian governments. In her interviews, Atwood offers up Iran and Afghanistan as examples of religious theocracies forcing women out of the public sphere and into their homes, as in Gilead. The state-sanctioned murder of dissidents was inspired by the Philippines, and the last General Secretary of the Romanian Communist Party Nicolae Ceausescu's obsession with increasing the birth rate led to the strict policing of pregnant women and the outlawing of birth control and abortion. However, Atwood clearly explains that many of these deplorable acts were not just present in other cultures and countries, but within Western society, and within the Christian tradition itself. The Republic of Gilead struggles with infertility, making off-aid services as a handmaid vital to producing children, and thus reproducing the society. Handmaids themselves are untouchable, but their ability to signify status is equated to that of slaves or servants throughout history. Atwood connects their concerns with infertility to real-life problems our world faces, such as radiation, chemical pollution, and venereal disease. Atwood's strong stance on environmental issues and the negative consequences for our society has presented itself in other works such as her Madidown trilogy, and refers back to her growing up with biologists and her own scientific curiosity. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe below.